Okay, I'm going to talk about the temporary residence visas for Poland, Ukraine, Spain, and Portugal. Okay, the Spanish non-lucrative visa. You have to prove that you have savings of 28,000 euros per year. This is 4 times the minimum Spanish wage. You have to have proof of medical insurance paid for a year. You need a police clearance from the FBI, clear criminal record. This has to be apostilled, which means officially notarized by the Secretary of State. You need a medical clearance from your doctor. And also the other documents that are similar to the Portuguese visa. You have to have accommodation proof of accommodation. You have to have a rental lease contract. You are required to stay 6 months out of the year in Spain. All of the documents must be officially translated into Spanish by a certified translator authorized by the government of Spain. For the Portuguese D7 visa, you must prove only 7,620 euros per year, proof of investments or savings. You must stay in Portugal for 8 months out of every year, uninterrupted, or 16 out of 24 months of your 2-year residence permit. You have to have proof of accommodation beforehand. So either you're going to have to go to Portugal or you'll have to get a real estate agent to procure property for you, and at least this is a confusing part that sort of hindered me from applying for this visa. You have to have prepaid medical insurance for at least 4 months. And of course you need the apostilled FBI clearance, clear criminal record, and a doctor's certificate as well. For Poland, this is something I'm currently doing. You have to buy health insurance from a Polish company and proof of payment. You have to deposit $20,000 in a bank in Poland. You have to prove you have a rental or a lease of an apartment or accommodation. You have to prove, in my case, student status, and you have to prove full payment of this. The process apparently takes 4 months. You can apply while you're in Poland. For the Spanish and Portuguese visas, you have to apply within your own country at the Spanish or Portuguese consulate there. You can't be in Spain or Portugal and apply for the temporary residence visa. Ukraine, the Ukraine temporary residence visa or permit, I applied for. I lived in Ukraine for 3 years from 2019 until 2022. This cost me about $3,000. I had a lawyer help me. It entailed 3 trips to Kiev from Odessa to sign official documents, procure health insurance, etc. I needed to buy Ukrainian health insurance for an entire year. I had to register my company, appoint myself director, and give myself a work permit. So there's a lot of documents involved. I had to have an official company address, which is a fictitious business address, and I had to pay for that as well as every year I have to update that official company address. I needed to provide a photocopy of my banking and investment balances to prove I had enough money to live in Ukraine for 3 years, because it was a 3-year temporary residence permit. So it was expensive, but it was fairly easy to get. I had to take a trip outside of Ukraine. In my case, I went to Spain and went to the Ukrainian embassy in Barcelona. Or you could go to Warsaw and do it, probably easier if you're in Ukraine. So you can apply for this visa while you are living in Ukraine. keep in mind that you can only stay 90 days out of every 180 days in Ukraine, similar to the tourist visa for European Union countries. So every 90 days you have to leave. But what's convenient is you can apply for this visa while you're in Ukraine. Before that, back in '92, I applied for a residence visa in Turkey. I got a teaching job in Istanbul, Turkey. Back then, it was before the internet and before email, so I had to fax and send by standard mail my diploma, my bachelor's degree, transcripts of courses I was taking, resume, letter of recommendation from my previous employer, which was a private school in Los Angeles, transcripts from my teacher credential courses I was taking, 2 trips, and this was before I went to Istanbul. That was all that was required, and then the school took care of the rest of the document bureaucracy stuff, except I had to take 2 trips to the immigration office with the director of the school to sign documents. When I went to Athens, Greece, I wanted to get a residence permit. And first I was looking for a job. I was there for about 2 weeks. And this was back in 1993 or 94, I forget. At that time, Greece was part of the EC, the European Community. I tried to get a job. They were very hesitant to give me a contract because it's much more difficult for them to hire Americans. If they needed English teachers, they just hired British citizens because they were part of the European Community at the time. So I left Greece. I couldn't get a firm job offer because it's just too much of a hassle for them to hire Americans. So I went to Spain and I took a course, a 1-month intensive course to get the Cambridge CETELFA, which is the Certificate in Teaching English as a Foreign Language to Adults, CTEFLA, nowadays referred to as CELTA, Certificate English Language Teaching to Adults. And this was in '93. After I got the certificate, I looked for jobs. I couldn't find them in northern Spain, but I got a pre-contract in Malaga, Spain, in the south. And so I moved to Malaga. In between that time, I spent July and August of '93 in Barcelona. Then I took a rest. I felt like going back to the United States. I went to Los Angeles for a month. And then I came back in September of '93 to Barcelona. All of September I was taking the Cambridge certificate course. And then from September to December, without any residence permit, I stayed in Malaga, Spain, and then I had to take a trip to the Los Angeles consulate of Spain to apply for my residence visa and work permit based on the pre-contract I got from a school in Malaga, Spain. So it was around December of '93. I went home for a month. I think that was the time of the Rodney King riot, so I saw the whole city go up in flames. And so I returned to Barcelona in around January '94, and I stayed in Spain until around August. All the while, my residence visa and work permit was supposedly being processed, but it didn't come through. So by August of '94, and I was 7 months in Spain, just living there. I didn't even think of a residence permit or anything. I just stayed there. I didn't for a moment. I did make a trip to Gibraltar, but they didn't stamp passports anymore, so you couldn't just do a little border hop to Gibraltar. So essentially, I was 7 months straight from February to August in Spain. And I contacted the Spanish, the embassy or the government office, immigration office in Madrid, and they said they hadn't received my paperwork from the Los Angeles consulate. So I gave up on that. I couldn't start work in '94 because Spain had not processed my residence card. Really unusual. So I went back to Spain later, but in between the time, I went to Prague in the Czech Republic. Now, this is '96. And pretty much the same process. This was before the internet, really, and I got a teaching job in Prague, Czech Republic. And so I faxed and sent over all my documents, like express mail. I faxed my diploma, express mailed my bachelor's degree transcripts, copy of my passport, resume, letter of recommendation from the school where I taught in LA, transcripts from my teacher credential courses, etc., and a doctor's certificate that I was in good health. So it wasn't too hard of a residence visa to get. So I went to Prague in '96, and I was legal to live there and to work there, and I got paid. And this is back in '96, and I stayed there 6 months, and I decided, I don't know, the weather was too cold. I just sort of burned out on Prague very quickly within 6 months, and I decided I would go to Spain. So I went to Spain again from March until September '97, and I didn't have a residence permit there. I just decided I would go there. And then after that, I went to Andorra because I got a teaching job in the Principality of Andorra, which is in between France and Spain, up in the Pyrenees. And this was essentially the same thing as getting my residence visa in Istanbul or Prague. I faxed the documents. I took a plane actually from Malaga to Andorra la Vella. I just appeared, and this was after 7 months of living in Spain, undocumented. I didn't have any residence permit. I went to Andorra. I had all my documents in my suitcase that I had carried around, in various countries. And all these documents sufficed to get me a pretty instantaneous residence permit and work permit for Andorra in 1997. My diploma, copies of my diploma, bachelor's degree, passport, resumes, CV, letter of recommendation, transcripts from teachers' courses, my Cambridge certificate, all these notarized, and I just gave these to the director of the school in Andorra, and he had them translated, and I got a photo. I had a residence permit within like 2 weeks, and I started working. So after the Principality of Andorra, I went to Poland around '97, '98, and it was all pretty much the same. There was email then, so I think I found the job through some newsletter or found it through some email newsletter in these infancy stages of the internet. I emailed maybe a photo of my documents, but I think I did a lot of faxing and standard mailed for my Polish residence permit in '97. All the same documents that I would send. And I didn't have to go, as far as I remember, I never went to the Polish embassy in Los Angeles. I just went over to Poland and with all my documents, and they hired me. So I worked there for a year. The work permit process was fairly simple. The school took care of it. I had that stamped in my passport, and then I went to, from 99 to 2002, I went back to Prague in the Czech Republic, and I worked at a big international language school. I remember there were a lot of stamps and paperwork and bureaucracy that had to be administered by different immigration offices. I didn't have to apply at any embassy in the United States. I just went to Prague, and the school took care of all my residence permits. Unfortunately, I wasn't paid. I was only paid 1/2 my salary for 4 months until the residence permit and work permit was processed. So that's the catch. And after the translation agency, I worked in in language school, I worked in a translation agency, and I still had my residence permit from working in the language school, but the translation agency paid me under the table. They paid me cash, but they did note that my passport, my residence permit for the language school, which wasn't associated with the translation agency, my residence permit would expire. They didn't give me any help in this, and they told me to go to the immigration office, which had huge lines back in, I think it was 2009, it was around the year 2000. The lines at the immigration office in Prague were so long, I thought, I don't want to go through this shit. And my agency, translation agency, where I was employed, didn't help me at all. They just said, go to the immigration office and renew your residence permit. Of course, under the authority of my job, my employment status at the translation agency. But back then, every 4 months, they changed the immigration rules in the Czech Republic, and it became the biggest Kafkaesque maze of red tape bureaucracy. And that's when I decided at the end of 2001, for many reasons, just to split the Czech Republic. And so this was before, of course, Czech Republic was in the European Union. And they didn't get in the European Union until 2004. So over all these different residence visas, I have lived in many countries. I'm in a foreign country right now applying for another residence visa. I just have to be a student. I did research other countries for temporary residence visas. Basically, I was searching for a retirement visa. Just prove you have sufficient income. Proving $20,000 to $50,000 a year of income is not difficult for me, so I could do this. I researched France. France is a great country. It's not too difficult to get like a retirement or non-lucrative visa, meaning you can't work in France. You can sort of just retire. If you show you have money and you complete the paperwork, France is not too difficult for an American to get a retirement visa or just hang out in France. But France is a more expensive country, of course. The rent is like, my God, it's over 50% cheaper than United States. Rent in France is really a lot cheaper. However, the cost of living is very close to United States. I also looked at countries like Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. They have business visas that will entail about $50,000 to $200,000 upfront investment and a lot of paperwork. I looked into Slovenia, where they had a real estate visa. You could purchase property in Slovenia and get a residence visa. Croatia has a temporary residence visa, but to renew it, you have to leave the country for several months. And there's the same paperwork as in other countries, though not as difficult as the Spanish and Portuguese visas. Czech Republic, I think the only way you can get a visa there is to be a student, be a temporary student, and then just renew it, be a student every year. But it's not widely publicized, that form of visa. Otherwise, it's an investment visa or business visa, which entails a lot of money and paperwork. Overall, I think the easiest visa to get was probably the Portuguese visa because the income requirement is only around $8,000 per year. You have to prove $8,000 savings. That's nothing. But you have to be in the United States or your own country and apply at the consulates there rather than be in the country. Poland, there are different ways to live in Poland legally. I'm not going to talk about those now, and I'm not going to go into detail about my particular visa, but the visa I'm getting is probably the easiest to get in the European Union in Poland. It's not a well-known visa. I won't give the details now, and there's the other visa in another country that I was planning on. Actually another treaty for Americans living in a certain European Union country where you can reset your Schengen clock. Instead of 90 out of 180, there's another loophole for Americans, and I can talk about that in the next video. Anyways, that's my story of getting residence visas. I hope you didn't fall asleep. I almost did.